Hi, I'm Andrew Wallace, and welcome to the We've Got a Problem podcast, where each week we explore inspiring stories of struggle, success, and solutions to prevalent problems and how our guests have turned a problem into an opportunity. This week I'm joined by Brett Hoffstadt, an aerospace industry veteran who's on a mission to inspire young people to pursue careers in the so-called STEM fields. That would be science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. His books include How to Be a Rocket Scientist, which offers kids and young adults tips on how to begin their journey into the aviation and aerospace fields, and Goodnight Moonbase, a new take on the classic bedtime story which aims to inspire young children to believe in the challenge and promise of future space exploration. Brett, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew. It's a real privilege and a pleasure for me to be here with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I have a couple of kind of basic questions. I really like to start with how you got your start. Give us some background. How did you become a writer? What brought you to write these books? How did you get your start?
I'll try to make it not a complete life story, but I'll say that since I was a little boy, as soon as I can remember, I loved things that flew. Airplanes, rockets, anything like that. So those were my hobbies growing up. And my other big hobby, though, was music. I started piano playing at a young age. As soon as my parents could afford getting a piano, we had one. And so my creative outlet as a hobby was music playing and music composing, writing my own music. But that was always on the side.
Sure.
And when I was in high school, deciding what should I do for a career, I said, well, my two big passions are airplanes and music. And being somewhat analytical, I said, well, I think engineering and airplanes is probably a smarter career choice, more likelihood of a good paycheck and good opportunities. And I didn't really see myself as a concert roadie, rock star kind of person. So I went into engineering and had a very rewarding and happy career working with airplanes for a couple decades and really enjoyed that. And I was, during that time, I really wanted to encourage other people to pursue careers like that. So I did a lot of mentoring and volunteering with professional societies to encourage younger kids and students to pursue these kind of fields also. And then in 2014, I was part of a layoff trend with my company. And so I said, okay, well, this is my chance to do something unique. And so one of my other strengths and passions was writing and books. So that's when I said, I'm going to try and learn how to write a book and publish it.
Sure.
And this was also the time, there's a little bit more to the story with music, but basically 2014 is when I realized, thanks to the internet and Amazon and other publication channels like you have now here with your own podcast, you didn't need a big book publisher to publish your own book. You could do it yourself.
Correct.
And that's a huge theme of the book, in the book, How to Be a Rocket Scientist, is that we live in a day now where you don't need other people's permission or authority to do something. And that's huge. I think more people need to appreciate that.
That's so important because so often people are in a modality of asking for permission. I've got to get permission. I can't start until I have permission, whether from their parents or from society or their teachers or whatever, that you can't get started. And that's especially in today's world, that's totally false. Yes, yes, yes. That's
right. Yep. So I thought kids need to appreciate this and be aware of this. And so I said, so I thought we're living in a world of abundance, and kids need to appreciate that. So there's plenty of opportunities. I really believe there's never been a better time to be alive, especially if you want to go into aerospace or aviation or the other STEM fields. And so in How to Be a Rocket Scientist, I give kids 10 tips to start from wherever they are now, and wherever they are in the world, wherever they are in society, in their economic class. And here's some accessible ways that you can start doing something and learning something, and then create your own path for a career that could be the career of your dreams. And it doesn't have to be technical.
Yes.
So one point I make in the book is rocket science is more about rockets and science. It could be everything. So for instance, an example I give is in spacecraft with astronauts, they have to live in a capsule they need interior designers. So you
Yes.
could be an interior designer that specializes in spacecraft, and we need those people. We also need food scientists,
Yeah.
dietitians, because that has to be special food, right?
Right. No,
So
exactly. So, I mean, why do you think it is that kids are not pursuing careers in the STEM fields? What's holding them back? What's the hurdle here?
well, I have put a lot of thought into this and some research as far as I can do by myself, but I've also learned a lot through my volunteering and mentoring efforts.
Hmm.
And so I've gradually worked. What I've learned is that the sooner we start, the better. There's there's kids when we're little, we have dreams and goals about looking up at the moon and the stars, and it's a common dream, I think, for kids to think about being an astronaut. And then something happens as we get older and go through school, and it's not very fostering process, I think, in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. So what I eventually decided, and this leads to the other book you mentioned, is I really think if we can hook kids young when they have that childlike passion and dreams, and show them that there's a way that they can continue with that throughout their life, then
Hmm.
we have some hope for them and they have some hope.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
why I decided what's the soonest and earliest we could give kids some inspiration and some knowledge about the potential out there and the opportunities. And so that's when I came up with the idea of making the bedtime book Goodnight Moon Base, which is a spinoff of the popular classic Goodnight Moon.
Right. Exactly. We talk a little bit about kind of what the future might hold and continuing to inspire people. You look at the future as having a lot of challenge and promise, I suppose. What do you see for the future? Give us a little bit of a taste. Where are the opportunities here? Where are we going?
We're living in a time now where every decade is dramatically different than the decade before it. So if you think about the 90s became very different than the 80s before it, the 2000s were very different than the 90s, and so on and so forth. So all we can know for sure is that our decades ahead are going to be very different. What I really think we need to foster with kids and with their parents and families is that we need to be able to blaze our own trail
Hmm.
and decide to create our future rather than just react to it. We have a lot of freedom and opportunity to decide how we want to create the world. And that's also a big message and goal why I made Goodnight Moon Base, is because we now have several efforts of people going to the moon who all want to make it a permanent moon base, moon settlement
Hmm.
there. We have the Americans, our government with NASA. We have the Chinese government going there that's more militaristic. And our
Hmm.
own government also, we have a defense department that I'm sure would like to have a military moon base. And
Right.
then there's the private efforts with SpaceX and Elon Musk that want to do it. And there's other commercial ventures that want to make moon mining operations. So that's it's going to be incredible. We're going to live in a science fiction world, really, that will be science reality. So what I really think we need to do, what I want to do, is encourage more people to pursue the good, noble, and peaceful reasons to go to the moon and
Yep.
beyond. And to me, that some people say, well, we really shouldn't be encouraging this. We have too many problems on Earth. We have to focus on those.
True. True.
And my response to that is, well, how have we been doing with that since the 60s when we went to the moon the first time?
Right.
I don't think we're doing well enough. And if you think about the 60s and the Apollo program, that inspired entire generations to do great things after that.
Yes.
Kids,
Yes.
I'm not quite that old. I was actually born during the Apollo 13 crisis.
Oh.
So my one time I asked my parents, well, what were you thinking about? What did you think when this was happening? And they said, well, actually, we kind of were distracted. We were trying
Just
to
a little bit.
figure out how to keep you alive as our first
Right.
son, basically. Right?
Right. Yes, of course. Of course. So, I mean,
But my
I've,
point,
no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, sorry, but so my point though is the Apollo missions, they inspired entire generations, and when I work with people from the engineering and aerospace industry, many of them said, the older people at least, I grew up, I saw Neil Armstrong walk on the moon. That made me want to pursue a career in one of these fields. So I'm convinced that we are on the cusp of another great opportunity now, because within the next year or two, definitely next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see people walk on the moon again, and it's exciting. So
Yes.
we need to capture that energy and harness it for good.
Yes, yes. And I mean, so what I was going to say was there are so many things that came out of it, came out of the space program, the effort to go to the moon, the effort to explore, all the things that we invented, the mathematics we had to invent, the machines we had to invent, the ways that we had to test things, the way that we had to do all these things. A lot of trickle-down effects came from this. And I'm not necessarily a proponent of all this stuff is eventually going to trickle down and how long it's going to take and all that, because it's an amorphous concept and it could be forever. But even if you just look at the fact that we couldn't have gone to the moon without intense computing power and being on the forefront of all these things, to the advent of transistors and the modernization of all these things that came about. Hey, look, there's a lot of stuff that actually hugely benefited to society, was a benefit to society from doing these programs. The future is bright, and we need to keep kids excited about it and get excited about it ourselves, because there's a lot of cool stuff on the horizon. Yes, yes, yes. So you've got a quote in one of your bios that hope is not a plan. Will you tell me more about that?
Since I started as an engineer, I eventually moved into project management for a lot of these aviation projects.
Sure.
Because I saw, I guess I appreciate the systems engineering aspect of how complex machines are built, and I just love how everything has to come together and work together in an effective way. One of my first manager, when I was a project manager at Boeing, his name was Lee, and he liked to say this in our meetings, because often he would ask, well, when will you get that done? Or, what's the risk of getting this design made, or something like that? And people would sometimes say, well, we're hoping that this will happen, or we're hoping this person will come through. And so he would say, well, hope is not a plan.
Hope is not a plan. Absolutely.
So, well, great lesson.
It's a fantastic lesson. I think one of the things that comes down when people when people go into meetings and they talk about where they're going and what their plans are and how they're going to get there, they refuse to talk in specifics because they don't want to get pinned down, right? I don't want to be locked down to saying this is what we're going to do and then it doesn't happen. But you have to commit. You have to move forward. You have to have a plan. I guarantee you it's not going to go according to plan, but having that plan gives you some place to start revising. It's especially a place to start. You don't know where you're going to get to. You don't know how you're going to get there necessarily, but I have a plan for how I might figure it out. The fact is that there is a strategy to figuring out the unfigureoutable and to coming up with a solution that, again, like I said about the space program, we're kind of inventing it as we go along. Nobody has gone to the moon before. How do we get there? You've got to have thought through it. And again, hope. I hope I'll figure it out when it comes. Probably not a great plan for these things. So on some of the other things, you've got a couple of really interesting things on your resume I can't not talk about. You were vice president of the Drone Pilots Federation. How did you get into that? Tell me more about that. That sounds awesome. What did that involve?
Well, thanks. Well, it really was based on my desire to make an impact, a positive impact with the commercial drone world. At the time when the FAA here in the United States, Federal Aviation Administration, was developing their rules for commercial and private drone use. So it was a fun experience. The organization doesn't exist now. We actually closed it up because part of the challenge in today's world is you have to figure out how to make something sustainable.
Yes.
And find the audience and the market.
Yes.
So we didn't crack that nut completely with Drone Pilots Federation. But what we did do was we gave some workshops. We worked with fire departments, fire agencies in
Hmm.
our region here in California to try and encourage them and help them to bring drones into their use for public service and public safety. So we also brought some other experts and leaders together that were not just drone pilots, but legal experts,
Hmm.
regulatory experts, to and some professional pilots to help bring the people together with the right knowledge and tools to be safe and legal operators. So
Yes, and you guys also organized drone racing at one point, right? You were a sanctioning body for drone racing. What?
we were the president and founder of Drone Pilots Federation is a great guy who I'm still friends with, Bruce Parks, and he actually he did a lot with the drone racing organizations. He also organized one of the very first, I think it was the first unmanned traffic management symposium that was with NASA experts and people from all over the world. In the very beginning, when we realized drones were going to be now an accessible technology for
Yes.
people, how do we integrate them into our airspace? That's a
Yes.
huge challenge. That's a huge
Yes.
problem, right?
Yes. Yes. And in fact, it's a problem for for a lot of people. And the regulations have changed and they're evolving, and it's hard to even know what to do. My brother has a drone that he bought a couple of years ago, and he thought it'd be really cool because we could fly it a little bit above the house and get some photos and do some fun stuff. And it's become to the point you can't fly it anywhere anymore because you can't fly it in a state park, you can't fly it here, you can't fly it over people, you can't fly it with this.
Mm-hmm.
We live within 5 miles of an airport. Can't do that. Got to check with the tower. How are you supposed to check with the tower? I'm only flying 100 feet up. I'm not going to crash into a helicopter, I promise. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff to think through, and I'm not sure necessarily that we've gotten it, and we can talk about that later. But there's a lot of again, planning. I'm big on planning, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of stuff to think through and to be able to leverage the technology
Well, there's
to.
a case where the government or airlines maybe could say, well, people are just flying their own toy drones. We can hope they won't hit an airliner, right? But
Right.
hope is not a plan, right?
Right.
It's not a good plan. Again, every challenge creates an opportunity. So
Well, and I think getting excited about solving problems is if I could inspire people to be excited about figuring out a problem and here's a solution, and I've got a way to do this better, is something that children, kids, teenagers, again, don't ask for permission. If you've got a way to solve a problem, let's do it, man. Let's get going. Let's get excited. Let's make something happen. Now, we have to talk about it because I know that, well, I say have to. If you don't want to talk about it, you're more than welcome to. But I'm curious about your work with CARB, the California Air Resources Board. Now, for folks who don't know, California is the only state that's allowed to set their own emission standards, basically because they started doing it years before the federal government stepped in. So other states can adopt California emission standards, but they cannot set their own. And CARB is kind of the body that takes care of setting those standards and regulations and figures out how to keep our air clean, which I, as a resident of Los Angeles, am grateful for the efforts of CARB. What can you tell us about your work there, and how can we help ensure that we have, again, a problem solved, that we have clean air to breathe now and in the future?
I'll tell you what I do there, and it's a very small part of what CARB is known for and what they do. So what I do is I work with a section that tests heavy duty trucks, diesel trucks,
Okay.
for their emissions, and it's a nice hands-on job. I get to work with trucks, and I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer, but sometimes I'm more of a mechanic sometimes,
Right.
and a truck operator. But what else can I say? It's just it definitely makes me appreciate the clean air we have here in the state of California. We have
Yeah.
beautiful blue skies, and it wasn't always that way.
No,
And
far from
I
it.
see pictures and videos of people in other countries like India and China that are really just horrific with the pollution and the health effects from the air there. So I think that's another case where with challenges and problems come opportunities. What we do also have a challenge though is we need to figure out ways that are sustainable for these improvements and programs too, and we need to figure out how to allow people still be prosperous, do the
Yes.
business they need to do, we still need an economy. We still need energy. We still need transportation. So it's definitely, California is definitely an aggressive state in terms
Yeah.
of regulations
Yes.
and pollution controls. So definitely good arguments to have and debate about what should be done. We have plenty of opportunities to improve, and it should be in everyone's interest, especially kids who want to solve problems, to find more efficient ways to move around the world and to have machines. Because I think of it, I like to have the long view when I can. And if I just think it's impossible to believe that we've discovered all the sources of energy that we'll ever have as a species. We have nuclear, but we haven't miniaturized that yet for vehicles.
Right.
Well, we have for submarines, which is impressive. I'm sure there's other things we can discover that are major leaps forward. For instance, we still don't know how gravity works, really, when you come down to it. So when are we eventually going to make a gravity engine, which would be anti-gravity? Right? I'm sure it's possible. We just don't know how to do it yet. So there's plenty of opportunities, and we also have things that are more closer to today, like fuel cells and hydrogen engines. We have electric cars. So there's still plenty of opportunities, and it's exciting. There's a world of opportunities for kids to learn about and make an impact. So.
Yes, absolutely. So we're kind of coming to the end here. I have a couple of questions I try and ask everybody. And the first is, what do you think the biggest fallacy is that everybody buys into? What's horribly overrated? And this can be broad in the world, or it can be very specific to your exact focus. What do you think's overrated? What's just total hogwash?
Okay, well, we actually touched on it already, and that is the idea that people need permission or someone else's authority to make a difference and to get started down a path that they want to pursue. Really, you don't need it anymore. So I say go for it.
Good. And conversely, what is underrated? What do we need more of?
The flip side, or the complement of that also, if you want to take initiative and pursue something, you need courage to do it. So I really think we need more courage in today's world, the courage to think for yourself and the courage to act on your beliefs and to follow through and persist despite the challenges and obstacles, because everybody has them. I've had them. Nobody succeeds without pushing through or finding a way around those fears and those obstacles. So with courage, that can really solve everything.
That's a huge thing. Folks, thank you so much for joining me, Brett. I really appreciate it. If you want to know more about Brett, check out his website, howtobearocketscientist.com, and follow him on LinkedIn and Twitter. Links to everything, including his individual book web pages, are in the show notes as always. And until next time, I'm Andrew Wallace, and we don't have a problem. We've got an opportunity.